Welcome to School Composting, the second feature of the fourth in the series of webinars for the Clean, Green, and Healthy Tribal Schools Initiative that are scheduled each Wednesday through February the 22nd at this same time. Several of the programs are double features, and today you're enjoying 3 programs. You're joining 128 other guests from communities, tribes, federal and state government agencies, schools, universities, Head Start programs, businesses, architectural and engineering firms. Thank you very much for your interest in the health of our schools. And
welcome to GoToWebinar, Web Events Made Easy.
Gardening project at a tribal school in her community that was sponsored by the Learn and Serve America grant. There she worked with science, language, math teachers, students, cannery workers, parents, and grandparents. Diane likes worms. The school's vermi composting project paid some of its own expenses. So great. So there's Diane. All right. Before Diane gives you the answers, will you respond to 2 questions about composting by selecting and clicking on the answer that you prefer? After everyone has indicated your choices, I will share the results with you. All right, so the first question, these things are a part of a healthy compost. So I'm not seeing any vote. Oh, somebody had lots of votes. We're moving quickly, Diane. Some split decisions here. More than half have voted. All right, about 3/4 have voted, so we'll close the poll and share the results with you. And after Diane's presentation, we'll see what you have learned. I'll hide the results. And I have another poll for you here. Actually, I don't, so we'll move on. All right. All right, Diane. So Diane will describe how and why composting benefits school and communities and how compost accelerates the making of healthy soil. Diane?
Saguli, Diane Jourdan Nilgetz, Onyat Ag. Hello, I am Diane Jourdan, and I am Oneida. The purpose of this presentation is to provide professionals with a resource that will encourage them to initiate composting of food and other organic matter in tribal and other schools. You will learn how your tribal school can reduce your waste stream and increase your recycling rate by recognizing the importance and value of waste reduction and composting. For many of us in this country, it is easy to replace things, so we don't think about throwing a banana peel, a soda can, baby diaper, or plastic cup or bottle into the trash. We are pleased that we are being tidy. Did you know that there are some human-made things that may never decompose? Sending things to the landfill is the unnatural process for reclaiming resources. Sadly, the nutrients that end up in the landfills that could go back to the earth can't, because landfills are built to contain hazardous elements. Some studies say that plastic drinking containers, bottles, and fast food soda cups may still be around in 2012. Schools are one of the biggest producers of solid waste in our communities. Ask your custodians and your maintenance people how much waste they carry to the garbage bins every day. 75 cubic feet? 150 cubic feet? Enough in a year to fill the school building? Schools are one of the biggest producers of solid waste in our communities. Ask your custodians and your maintenance people how much waste they carry to the bins every day. The EPA reported that 27% of all municipal solid waste sent to landfills in 2010 was food and yard waste that could have been composted and that could have been recycled into healthy soil. Composting is recycling and reusing natural materials and creating healthy soil. Organic materials contain nutrients that are lost when they go out with the trash. Stand in the school cafeteria at lunch and observe how many pounds of compostable food get scraped into the trash. When the Oneida Tribe of Indians of Wisconsin conducted a waste stream characterization study of our elementary school in 2000, we were surprised to discover that about 65% of the discards were materials that could have been recycled or composted. This included food such as vegetables and fruits, breads and lunch bags and napkins. If you stand in your school cafeteria at breakfast and/or lunch, how many pounds of compostable food would you see being scraped into the trash? If soil were gold, and it is, we are throwing away millions. So how do you start a school composting program? As Virginia Till mentioned in her presentation, and in this graphic from the EPA, you should start with waste reduction. Reduce waste first, then plan for composting. One way to reduce food waste is donating non-perishable and unspoiled perishable food to local food banks, soup kitchens, and shelters. Some programs offer to pick up the surplus. They may even provide transportation and reusable containers. Our food waste can be food for animals. Hog farmers may welcome discards. Liquid fats and solid meat products can be used as raw materials in the rendering industry, where they are converted into animal food, cosmetics, soap, and other products. There may even be vehicles or machines that run on used cooking oil in your community. The option before sending to the landfill is composting. Composting can be done both on and off school grounds. Your school will have to decide what is best. And don't forget that a school garden is a great place to reuse the compost. Returning earth to earth is a true Native American value. Composting gives us a way to keep organic materials in the cycle of renewal, the circle of life. Even smaller efforts at composting, such as backyard composting, recycling food scraps, and plant clippings, provides an opportunity for people to create soil and return valuable nutrients to the earth. Not only is it a good thing ecologically, but it also saves money in disposal costs. Composting diverts unnecessary waste from the waste stream, but it can be a financial benefit for tribes that subsidize waste disposal. Black Elk and Oglala Sioux Holy Man pointed out the importance of the circle. We take from the soil and we can create healthy soil. In a sense, it creates life from death, matter from energy, organic from inorganic, animate from inanimate, and resource from waste. Consider that when compost is added to a soil amendment for gardens, children and the tribal members can grow healthy, low-cost produce and can even revive skills that may have been lost. According to the Iroquois creation story, long before there was land, there was water all over. They had it right. We now know that 75% of Earth is surface water. 2/3 of the remaining surface is not farmable. That's mountains and deserts. Only 1/12 of the Earth's surface is potentially farmable land, but 3/4 of that soil has been eroded by wind and water due to industrial and farming practices. That leaves 1/48 of the entire Earth's surface to raise food for 6.5 billion people and many times more animals. And that soil is scattered all over the planet with varying degrees of fertility and microbiotic life. The Tribal Waste Journal of June 2005 relates 6 stories of tribes that are recycling, reusing, and composting organic waste. So, what exactly is compost? It is the end product after the breakdown of materials that were once alive. What that means is that organisms eat the apple core and bread crust. They digest them. Their excretions combine with air, moisture, and heat to create nutrient-rich compost. I'll talk about these important critters in a bit, but for now, just know that they can eat food scraps and yard trimmings and even some paper products, and that can be combined in your school's compost pile. I did say heat, didn't I? Did you know that compost piles, especially commercial composting, can reach internal cooking temperatures of between 120 and 150 degrees? Yuck. You know how some people think dirt is dirty? Well, you know what I mean. The truth is that we all depend on dirt and all its resident organisms for food and for life. As gooey as it is the foundation of all our histories, a reservoir for the building blocks of life. Healthy soil is crowded and teeming with life, a complex web of organisms, some of which are only now we're beginning to understand. Healthy soil is full of life. What we might call creepy crawlies are micro and macroorganisms. The microorganisms include bacteria, fungi, and algae. And the macroorganisms may include worms, reptiles, and mammals. Can you guess how many pounds of living things there are in an acre of healthy soil? How many pounds of earthworms? Of arthropods? Did you guess right? Healthy soil contains 7,240 pounds of below-ground life per acre, including 900 pounds of earthworms and 900 pounds of arthropods, like centipedes. There are 7 billion living organisms in every handful of fertile soil, and a teaspoon of soil may contain several yards of fungal-type root systems called hyphae. A school composting program can help ensure all these great organisms make a home in your community and stay. So you shouldn't be afraid of these creepy crawlies, but build soil that welcomes these important nutrient creatures. You can see the circle and interdependency of life and the importance of soil. Plants capture sunlight and recycle the nutrients so they become available to other life. From soil comes food for uncountable terrestrial organisms, including us humans. Earth's healthy soil produces food, habitat, beauty, and comfort for all species. What happens quite naturally in healthy soil is that plants both thrive from and feed the soil. Nitrogen-fixing bacteria contribute to the aerobic and anaerobic bacteria and fungi's ammonification, which goes to the nitrifying bacteria, and so on. When we compost organic materials, we are creating a laboratory for these things to happen naturally, and with our help and contributions. So, like the natural process above and underground, compost is produced through the activity of microorganisms. These require oxygen, moisture, and food in order to grow and multiply. And if we provide these things, we create soil. Not only that, but if we prepare our compost just right, the natural decomposition process can be accelerated. When compost is active, it passes through a high temperature phase that sanitizes the soil and speeds up decomposition. This is followed by a lower temperature phase that allows the compost to stabilize while still decomposing at a lower rate. There are many ways to compost, and here are 3. Pile or windrow composting is just what it sounds like. Organics are formed into rows or piles, and they may be aerated by turning the debris manually or mechanically. The in-vessel containers are enclosed and come in a variety of sizes, such as this barrel-looking bin or the rolling bin shown on the slide. They can process large quantities in a small area. Vermicomposting is my favorite, and one of the ways that the school I worked with defrayed some of their costs. Worms. Carolina said, "I like worms, and this is why." They break down organic materials into high-value compost. They're worm castings, or as the kids like to call them, worm poop. Vermicomposting is faster than either of the 2 methods above. Any of these methods could be adapted to a school program. Because composting is an acceleration of the decomposition process, it requires resource products and bulking materials, or food called greens, and dry organics such as leaves or wood chips called browns. In a compost pile, the ratio of browns to greens gives the decomposers, all our little critters, a balanced diet. Alternating layers of browns and greens helps to maintain the ratio, keeping the compost pile light and loose and flowing air, allowing air to move freely through it. Here you can see the inside of a healthy compost pile. Greens provide nitrogen, browns provide carbon, and the decomposers provide heat. Compost improves soil structure, porosity and density, and creates a better environment for roots to grow. It increases infiltration and permeability of heavy soils, reducing erosion and runoff, improves water holding capacity, reducing water loss and leaching in sandy soils. Rich soil supplies a variety of beneficial macro and micronutrients and may control or suppress certain soil-borne plant pathogens. It can even bind and degrade some pollutants. Compost reuses and recycles, produces healthy soil, and contributes to the health of all living things. Beyond that, composting by schools can help the environment and the community by reducing the school's solid waste stream, recycling natural resources, extending the life of a leaching field and septic tank if a garbage disposal system has been in use, reducing nitrogen loading to the local sewage treatment facility, educating the school community about benefits of composting, and creating a useful product for landscaping projects. Do you want to consider school composting? First, a don't, and then some do's. Don't start a school compost without a plan. Composting is not just a short-term project. Like a garden, it requires long-term commitment and regular attention. Now for your do's. Do first develop a plan. Talk with staff, teachers, community members, and children and get their support. Learn about composting so you can speak knowledgeably about the process and the project. It's okay to start with a small pilot program or to develop the program in phases. Be sure you get support from administration and follow the school's protocols. Get the community involved. Our tribal elders were invaluable to our program. We encouraged elders to volunteer with the gardening and showing students the proper way to plant and work the soil. They also worked with the students in the tribal cannery when strawberries and other berries came into season by showing them how to preserve the harvest. At the end of the growing season, a feast was held to thank all for their participation during the growing season. Canned goods from the garden were handed out to the elders. Students are really the target audience for the composting program. They can be a major part of it by participating in sorting their food waste daily in the cafeteria. A compost team of 10 to 12 students could become the core composting team. They help with the daily tasks of delivering the compost to the composting location, adding browns to the greens, turning the compost, checking its temperature, or adding worms like the Turtle Elementary School children did. It's important to begin educating students about composting at the beginning of the school year and initiating the youngest students into the routines of sorting their lunch waste. Keep students, teachers, staff, and community motivated. Send out news featuring the science or math projects that students have done with the compost. Give recognition. Make stories and jokes, public address announcements, prizes, signs, and posters of progress of the pile. Just be creative and use the compost as a learning resource. There is much to be gained by engaging students, staff, and teachers and the community in a school composting program. Without much effort, I am sure you can think of ways that the examination of the school's waste patterns, recycling of organic materials, managing and measuring progress, and the focus on healthy soil and healthy bodies can easily contribute to class studies, projects, and learning. These are resources I used in the development of this program and that offer helpful information for your composting project. I am looking forward to hearing from some of our participants if they have engaged in recycling and reusing, particularly of organic materials in composting or in other ways. Yanko and Nugiwa. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, Diane. We'll get to your questions next, but we hope Diane's presentation on composting has added to or refreshed your knowledge of the issue. After the poll, your questions, and a brief announcement, Diane will encourage you to use that compost you've developed in a school garden. So let's take a look at the poll. Diane, let's see how well folks participated. Here's your question. A healthy compost contains almost 50% have voted. slowing down, so I'll close the poll and share the results with you. So Diane, you can see that as well. Any comments about the results of the poll?
Well, I think everyone was paying attention.
It looks like it. 85% say all of the above. Great, thank you.
That's awesome.
It is awesome, thank you. All right, so let's see if anyone has questions. Do you have questions for Diane or comments? Here's one from Dan. Let me be sure. Rebecca, are you available to share any of these questions or comments?
Hi, Carolina. We do have a comment here from Dan Anderson. He says that they compost at their school lunch program and have had a worm composting program at the Fond du Lac Ojibwa school for 12 years. And they use the compost in conjunction with their school community garden.
That's great.
Yeah. Anything else? I see a couple comments from Josh. Josh, would you like for me to open your microphone so that you could speak to all of us? If you'll raise your hand, I'd be glad to do that. Looks like you have some comments or questions, or I see. Can't find your name. If you raise your hand, Josh, I can open your microphone. Josh, looks like he just left a question. So I'm not sure what he meant, Diane. Let's see if you can sort it out. Carbon sources called greens, nitrogen sources called browns. He's got both of those.
He's got them switched around. Nitrogen is are the greens, your grass clippings, and the carbon is your browns, which are your twigs, your
grass.
What did I say? Grass,
yeah. Things
like that. The hay or straw that you put in there, those are the browns, and those are their carbons.
I see a couple more questions. Rebecca? So Christina is asking, Diane, does the compost have to be a good distance from the building? Very good question, Christina.
Yes, that's a very good question. It should be easily accessible to the kids. I wouldn't think that it would have to be that far away from the school. Our school's compost pile was perhaps, I'm going to say 100 yards. And that's like half a block, maybe half a city block. But it was all sidewalk out to the compost pile itself, and then a mulched path that led up to the compost pile with wood chips and other mulching material to keep it clear for the wheelbarrow and the wagon to get through.
Thank you, Diane. Phil, you have a question and you've raised your hand, so I'm going to unmute you. So would you like to ask your question, Phil?
Yes, if I may.
Go right ahead.
Okay, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Hopi Reservation in Arizona, but we are located northeast of Flagstaff, Arizona, but we are in a very remote area where everything is basically brown. Now my question is, being that that's the case, what other green material can we use, as the green additives to the composting?
Very good question.
That is a very good question. And in the dry areas, I would think any grass clippings, any, even the manure from your animals, your horses, your cows, pigs, anything that does not have a meat base, that would work just as well with mixing in with the nitrogen. But think about adding more of the browns as well, because you don't want the nitrogen burning off the carbon and burning and killing your little critters that are already in the pile.
Great. Thank you, Diane. Here's another question. Is there a specific species of worm that we should use for worm composting?
Well, it's highly recommended to use the red roundworm. They're indigenous to the northeast, and they're a hardier worm. But when I first started out with my vermicomposting, I used a yellow African worm, which the gentleman who I worked with, who has a vermicomposting farm, and he donated all the worms for our project. He just gave these first ones to me to see how I could get them going. He said they were more used to warmer weather, and so he didn't think that they would survive in the cold northeastern temperatures, but they did. They thrived within a month, starting with one 10-gallon aquarium. I went from one 10-gallon aquarium within 1 month to 4. And that's how fast they reproduced, and that's that. But they were inside, they were in the classroom, and they were set over a heat register, so that did have a lot to contribute to their success, I think. They weren't sitting outside, or they weren't sitting in an area that was cooler. The redworms, however, they just go crazy in cooler weather, not too cold, like 45, maybe 50 degrees. And that's the best worm around, I think, is the redworm.
Great. Thank you, Diane. Diane can be reached at the phone number and the email address above. Thank you for attending the composting webinar. I did see that there were a couple more questions, and because we want to talk with you briefly about gardening, if you will hold those questions till after the gardening presentation, we will get to those. Diane will help us consider using our healthy compost infused soil for a school garden. And following that presentation, Virginia, Diane, and I will remain on the broadcast for a few extra minutes to be sure that we've answered all of your questions about recycling, composting, and gardening. Our Clean, Green, and Healthy Tribal Schools Initiative will be sponsoring a 2-day workshop in June or July this year. The workshop will include some of the programs featured in this series and additional topics. Participants will have opportunities for discussion and collaboration with the presenters and their co-participants in person. Please let us know if you might be interested in attending. These 3 and 8 other webinars on topics such as indoor air quality and PCBs in schools will be housed at http://www.epa.gov region8.tribalschools.